The Reformation wasn't a recovery, it was a rewrite. Discover the history they left out.
We've all heard the name John Wycliffe, right? The great hero of the Reformation. But what if that story we all know, the one about the lone hero fighting a corrupt church to free the Bible, what if that isn't the whole picture? Let's dig in and take a closer look.
Just listen to the title he's often given, The Morning Star of the Reformation. That's a heck of a title, isn't it? It just paints this incredible picture of a single brilliant light cutting through an age of total darkness, announcing a brand new day. It's a really powerful image, and honestly, it's the very heart of the legend we've built around him.
And the legend itself? Oh, it's super dramatic. The story goes something like this. You've got this lone Oxford scholar, right? He stands up to a completely corrupt church, and his big demand is for the Bible to be available to every single person. In this version of the story, the church makes translating the Bible a crime punishable by death. His followers, the Lollards, are hunted down. He's even declared a heretic after he's already dead and his bones are burned. It's the perfect David versus Goliath story. A lone hero against a massive, powerful institution.
So yeah, it's a fantastic story, but how much of it is actually true? Let's take that powerful legend and really hold it up against the historical evidence. Let's see what shakes out.
All right, so first things first, let's start unpacking this legend piece by piece and really take a close look at the claims being made.
Okay, so to be fair, the legend isn't completely wrong. Wycliffe absolutely did argue against the wealth and power of the clergy. That part's true. But when you start looking closer, other key parts of the story really start to fall apart. For instance, his direct influence on guys like Huss and Luther, it's often way overstated. And that central claim, the real blockbuster part of the story, that the church had a universal ban on translating the Bible, well, that's just flat out false.
And that last point is the real key here. It's the linchpin of the whole thing. The single biggest inaccuracy in the entire Wycliffe legend is built on this one powerful myth, the idea of the suppressed Bible.
So, let's dive into this Bible ban myth, shall we? Let's find out what the evidence really has to say about it.
Okay, so this is the line you hear all the time. It's a really shocking statement, right? And it works perfectly because it immediately creates a clear villain and a clear hero. The thought that just translating the Bible could get you killed, that's totally central to the legend. But let's put that claim side by side with the actual primary sources and see what's what.
And right away, here's the massive disconnect. The legend claims there was this universal ban, but the evidence people usually point to is from the Council of Toulouse back in 1229. And here's the thing, that wasn't a universal church-wide decree at all. It was a regional rule for non-clergy in one specific part of France, and it was created to deal with a very specific local heresy. It just wasn't a blanket law against all translation everywhere, not even close.
And look, the proof doesn't even stop with that one council. During this very same period, there were already approved, totally legitimate translations of the Bible floating around. You could find them in Old Church Slavonic, French, German, Italian. So this idea that the act of translation itself was forbidden, it just doesn't hold up to the facts on the ground.
Now, the other big piece of this legend is the setting itself, what people love to call the Dark Ages. See, the myth needs this gloomy backdrop of spiritual ignorance. It just makes Wycliffe's light seem so much brighter, But the reality? The 14th century was actually a time of incredibly rich and vibrant spiritual and theological life. You had major thinkers like Gregory Palamas in the East and tons of influential mystics in the West. It was anything but dark.
Okay, so if the big fight wasn't about the church trying to hide the Bible from everyone, then what was the real conflict about? What was actually going on? And this right here is where we get to the real heart of the matter. The myth gives us this super simple conflict, the good book versus the bad church. Easy. But the historical reality was way more complex and, honestly, a lot more interesting. The fight wasn't really about access to the Bible. It was about authority. The real burning question was who gets the final say on what the Bible actually means. And that whole debate really boiled down to two competing ideas. On one hand, you have the traditional model of conciliar authority. This is the belief that Scripture should be interpreted through the lens of tradition and the collective wisdom of the church. But on the other hand, you had this new emerging idea of individual interpretation. This was the notion that any individual has the primary authority to read and interpret Scripture for themselves. That was the real revolution.
That was the real fight. So you might be thinking, why does any of this matter? Why should we care about unpacking a story from the 14th century? Well, because this is about so much more than just John Wycliffe. It's really about how we tell stories about the past and how we understand history itself. Think about it. History isn't just a boring list of facts and dates, right? At its core, it's about the stories we choose to tell about those facts. And the stories we tell are incredibly powerful. They shape everything we believe about the past. And that, in turn, shapes how we see the world right now. And these powerful myths are usually built with the same classic storytelling tools. It's almost like a recipe. You take the Dark Ages trope to create a bleak world that's desperate for a hero. Then you add the suppressed Bible myth to give that hero a noble quest and a really obvious bad guy. It makes for an amazing story, but it's not always good history. And here's the real rub. When we just accept these simple hero versus villain stories without questioning them, it can seriously warp our modern views. These myths can actually create or reinforce prejudice because they replace messy, complicated history with a simple black and white tale that pits one group against another.
So all of this leaves us with a pretty important question to ask ourselves. What other historical stories do we just accept? What other heroes and villains have we taken for granted without ever giving them a second look? Because at the end of the day, questioning the narrative isn't about tearing down heroes. It's about getting closer to the truth and finding a much richer, more complete version of our own history.